And we're live to review an episode that does not have the greatest title in the world, but it's an okay story. Over to Jeff.
Yes, this is Homicide: Life on the Street, Season 6, Episode 5, entitled Baby It's You, which originally aired November 14th, 1997, written by Jorge Zamacona and directed by Ed Sheeran, same writer and director, and title as the first part on Law & Order that we reviewed last week. So I'm going to resume David B. 226 Morris's summary/review.
Right.
Point where he says, when the story changes series, the Janoways have fled the media circus that they helped incite and returned to Baltimore. It quickly becomes clear that Dr. Janaway is under suspicion for literally raping his daughter to death. For the first time in a very long time, Homicide focuses its energy on points of law. Jack McCoy wants jurisdiction over the case because of depraved indifference by the father. Danvers wants to prosecute in Baltimore because the crime fits the pattern of felony murder. The court makes a split ruling. The case is tried in Baltimore, but McCoy is allowed to co-chair the prosecution. The episode focuses on Jelko Ivanek for the first time this season, and seeing him in action with McCoy is a vivid contrast on how both shows regard the behave. McCoy is a relentless, righteous, and zealous prosecutor willing to twist the law in order to punish the guilty, not unlike Pendleton in some cases. In several episodes of Law & Order, we have seen McCoy bend, if not completely break the law, to get a conviction, and it has had repercussions. Danvers, on the other hand, is level-headed and professional. He wants to win, not punish. If he can avoid the risks of a trial, he will do so in order to see that some justice is carried out. Danvers is more pedestrian, but also in some ways a more realistic character than McCoy in that regard. Watching the two of them interact is new territory for Homicide, and it gives Ivanek some good screen time. In essence, this episode is more like a Law & Order than Homicide. To the extent that Homicide is involved, it focuses on Ivanek, John Seda, and Richard Belzer, and since we don't see a lot of Ivanek or Belzer normally, it's a welcome change. The major twist comes when the defendant reveals that he had an alibi for the time of the murder. He was having an encounter with a woman he was having an affair with for the past 10 years. Unfortunately, the action from this episode starts falling afterwards. Through interrogations, it is revealed that Mrs. Janaway sexually abused her daughter regularly and was responsible for the assault that killed her. Problem is, we haven't had so much as an inkling of this so far, and we don't get any real explanation as to why she did it. This is like a lot of Homicide, but in this case, the buildup has been so great, it's a disappointment to just get this. Still, there are things to admire in this episode. Among them is the chemistry that Lenny Briscoe and Munch share. They have a good rapport, and it's good to see them doing more than arguing about John's first wife. Belzer had a busy week. The same week this crossover aired, he also appeared in an episode of The X-Files. Also interesting is the performance of Seda. He goes after the killer of Brittany Janaway with a fervor that is on the level of Bayless. He can be intense, but unlike some of the other detectives, he isn't world-weary enough to believe that a man is capable of raping his daughter to death. His talks with McCoy about this are among the better parts of the show. During the course of this episode, a minor storyline sets up that he is divorced and has a 3-year-old son. Throughout the season, we will see him fight for shared custody of him. Baby It's You works better as an episode of Law & Order than Homicide. We don't get anywhere near the character stories that we usually get. The rest of the Homicide cast, only Lewis and Giardello getting significant screen time, and the story's resolution is unsatisfactory. There's some good acting from Maureen Anderman and Tom Tammy as the Janoways, but they spend most of the episode as if they are in some kind of fog. The trial is somewhat disjointed, and like most of Homicide's ventures into the courtroom, seems out of place, despite Ivanek and Watterson's work. The episode is little more than above average, which makes it the least of the 3 Law & Order Homicide crossovers. So he gives an individual review: Law & Order 7.8, Homicide 6.5, average 7.1. So anyway, that's what he says. Ben, what do you say? You gotta turn your microphone back on. Can you hear me? Ben?
Yes, thanks for that, Jeff. Thanks for telling me to switch the mic on. Yes, I was eating a Rocky bar, and I didn't want to spoil your sound. This episode, for me, it improved. You see, there was a low bar. I think Greg Gutfeld recently said that he talks about the Law and Order twist of, oh, you expect it's some poor guy, but really it's the rich guy. And so I had a low bar in mind for the kind of, I thought we'd already had the twist, because it was, I thought, oh, Law and Order, they don't do. And so when it was revealed, and I did sort of like, as soon as they revealed that he had a solid alibi, I thought, oh, that means, oh, maybe they're probably gonna go over to the wife now. That would be quite a good twist. But one of the things was, how many people, if they're having an affair, put their real names in the hotel?
Yeah, I noticed that too. I mean, I did think about that when they saw his name in there.
Yeah, and I was wondering, like, did he do that? Like, at one point, I was thinking, is he really super like INTJ or something, and like deliberately like set up a weird alibi? Because I was thinking that's a bit strange, but oh well. But that's just a minor thing. People do get arrogant. Maybe another story that maybe they wouldn't do these days, in terms of the angle of the mother being jealous of the daughter. Maybe there would be some discussions from the network. They may say, hey, we might have some feminist groups angry with us for saying that, talking about female jealousy and stuff and things like that. But the actual plot twist was, it's pretty good. I think that overall, the actual scenes between Munch and Briscoe, I think it is, could have been better. I don't know what you think about that. Can you imagine better scenes between those two?
Yeah, and I think, that's part of that is just that the focus was on other things that they didn't really have as much time. It seemed like with the first crossover that they did a better job of pacing it, where they had that scene at the end where everybody was in the bar together, where they had a little bit more opportunity for that, and this one they really didn't as much.
Yeah.
And really, in order for them to, they would have had to cut something else, so probably it would have been the McCoy-Falsone conversations.
Yeah, I also thought it was a bit weird that McCoy told a story about him finding his daughter attractive. Actually admitting that. I mean, pretty much the only person I've heard admit that is Donald Trump talking about Ivanka.
I've heard other people say a similar thing, where the same kind of thing where they didn't realize at first who they were looking at. And I think it's a fairly common thing where, a father that has a daughter that goes through puberty, and you sort of have that conflict of, she's becoming a woman, and if you're someone who's attracted to women, you're going to notice that your daughter is attractive, but you obviously don't have the same kind of, at least most people, don't have the same kind of feelings about their daughter in that way. So there is kind of it's a pretty common thing to have sort of conflict in that area. As far as how many admit it, yeah, I guess it's probably,
that's the thing.
It's not a huge number, but I think if people are honest, and they're not in the public, if they're just having a private conversation, I think probably most fathers would admit that at some point. Now, me personally, I don't have a daughter, so I haven't had that particular phenomenon happen, but obviously plenty of fathers have. So
yeah.
The first episode of My So-Called Life, they talked a little bit about that. Another reason I like that show so much is they covered some things that weren't necessarily often covered by other shows. And in that one, Angela says in her voiceover that her relationship with her father has gone downhill because her breasts have come between them.
Right. Let's have a look. If we go through these slides, then some other things might come to mind. One is that they got prints very quickly towards the end, some nice big prints to make the scenes. Oh yes, because we usually, you mentioned things to me before about sometimes like, oh, Ben, because there's been a couple of times when I haven't taken grabs of the board, and you said, oh, Ben, can you show the board? And I was like, no, I forgot to take it. So any of these relevant? I think this is for Munch. Yeah, these were all Munch's cases.
I do vaguely remember a couple of the names, but, you know.
Maybe
Elefante. It's fun, interesting that Munch hasn't had a case since Elefante, because that's now been several months. That was the one that he knew from school.
Oh, right. Yeah, and that episode could have been a whole lot better.
And Merchant, I think, was one of the Luther Mahoney involved cases.
Right. I thought the interrogation was okay with Munch, with her, and the acting was pretty good from the actress playing the mother. And I liked her choice at the end of, you know, when she pushed away the photos, you know, when she broke down.
Yeah.
I thought that was a good acting choice of, you know, when you notice someone being in the moment. And, like, that's what sort of, like, came to mind for the actress. So I thought that was good. Okay, what about some of these other ones? Have we seen any of other? Did we see Owen? Oh, what happened with the Owendorf thing and these ones in red? Have we seen these?
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, and of course there's a Welsh name with a double L for Lloyd. Yeah. I don't know how often Americans see that.
Quite a bit. Think of Lloyd Bridges or...
Oh, yeah. That's true.
Christopher Lloyd.
Right then. Maureen Anderman. Is she the mother?
Yes.
That did the deed. Right. Do you think this was almost like, in hindsight, a pilot for SVU?
If only, because the real pilot for SVU was more disturbing than this one was.
But would you have rather have liked SVU be more like this? More a bit, not as...
No.
Right. Okay. That's not really a series that I want to watch, SVU, and even you've said, a bit much.
I haven't yet. I may try again at some point, I don't know. When we're done with Homicide, I may try to do it, because that's what I did last time, is when Morgan and I finished Homicide, I watched the first one with the intention of sort of following the adventures of Munch after that, because I never really did that before.
I think one of the because of the way you tend to watch things, you do tend to watch things in one go, in a compressed period of time. That if it was spaced out with something else, say if you're watching, it would be easier.
That's what the recent thing I've been doing with watching the '80s stuff. I'm getting more disciplined, in that.
Yeah.
Because I'm watching stuff at like approximately the real days that it aired. So there's some things that there's a big gap, where they didn't show the next episode yet. So it's kind of teaching me some discipline there if I stick to it. Because I last week we rewatched the Wise Guy pilot. And obviously I could, anytime I wanted to, I could watch the first episode of season 2, but it didn't actually start till October of '88. So, and most things didn't because of the writer's strike that they had that year. So,
are you going to observe the writer's strike, Jeff?
Well, I'm not observing the strike. I'm just observing the dates.
Oh, okay.
So, but I'm using that time. I don't got a whole thing on this during the Homicide review, but I'm using the time in between new episodes of those things to catch up on other stuff that I'm behind on, so that I'm ready to have all those things lined up. But it's helping me with the discipline of, I don't have to watch the next one now. I can wait. And if I die before then so be it. Dan Hedaya, there's several things. I don't know if you were done with what your initial thoughts on the episode. I've got plenty of things I can say. Yeah,
pretty much. I can just chime in every now and then. I'm pretty much done, yeah.
Okay, because seeing Dan Hedaya's name reminded me that they set him up well in the Law and Order episode, and then it's such a letdown how he's barely in this. And they basically, it's like the courtroom scenes. I agree with Morris's thing about disjointed. Like the whole episode is disjointed.
Who does he play anyway?
He's the defense attorney for the Janaways. At least
right.
For both of them, but then becomes just the father's lawyer when they become sort of adversaries. But the courtroom scene was disappointing. The scene, there's a credibility problem. I know we've talked about you don't have to be 100% realistic, so obviously there's going to be some stretching. But this one has a lot of stretching reality, and there is no way that any lawyer worth a damn would have allowed the parents to have been interrogated the way they were.
Oh yeah.
And no way, especially the mother, but even the father.
Yeah.
They spend the Law and Order episode setting up this guy as a shark of an attorney, and then he basically just gives up in this part. He basically is just like, well, you sprung the alibi on me, so you're on your own now. I'm just going to sit here and let them say whatever they want to you.
Possible.
No real good lawyer is going to do that unless he had just decided he was going to screw Janaway. He's basically saying, well, you're on your own. I'm fed up with you. But I don't think, unless he, if he had other high-priced clients that were, ready to.
Well, he's paid by the man, not the woman.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
He doesn't support him though. Like, the thing is, he is under no obligation. At that point, he knows his client is going to walk. He's under no obligation to help the police nail the wife. So unless Janaway, the husband, has told him, I want to do that, which it doesn't seem like he does. There's no point in which he ever acts like he's out to get his wife in this situation. He says he should have taken Brittany away from it, but he never acts like he's bitter towards his wife about anything.
Yeah, that should have been expanded upon, and also maybe they could have added a bit more to that Dan Hedaya lawyer character. Yeah,
he comes out. If you had not seen the Law and Order part, if you had just saw this, you would think, can't this guy get a better lawyer? And especially the mother. I mean, her lawyer does. She says she seems to object to like one thing in the whole conversation, and the reality is that a good lawyer would have told Mrs. Janaway not to say
nothing. Yes.
Yeah, don't even talk to the cops.
You have the right to remain silent.
Right. We're not going to sit down here and let the cops, basically sit there and put pictures of your dead daughter in front of you. And there's no way that the lawyer would let her be subjected to that in real life.
That is one of those things, Jeff, in cop shows that's like aliens speaking English. When it comes to
but that's the thing.
People reading the rights and they're still talking.
Yeah, usually Homicide is better than that. There's a clear distinction for when somebody lawyers up, as they call it.
Yeah.
Then they're not interrogating them anymore, except with very rare exceptions. Which you do have them stretched every now and then, like the scene where they had the guy in the box where they said we can't talk to him, but we can talk to each other with him in the room.
Yeah,
that probably would have been thrown out in court because they would have said, at that point, if counsel wasn't present, he shouldn't have been subjected to that.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit weird, but most of the time, Homicide, they understand that the whole thing is the cops basically have lost once they ask for a lawyer. So their whole thing is trying to get the confession before they do, because once they do, then their part is basically done. It's the attorney's part. But in this episode, you had Danvers in there like he was a police detective interrogating. Like the whole thing was just it was just weird, which is why even Law and Order doesn't do things that weird. So the fact that they had it done on Homicide it's strange that this was the same writer-director that had been on both shows. They should know better than to create this scenario that wouldn't have happened on either show. I mean, Morris said it was more like a Law and Order episode, but that wouldn't have happened on Law and Order either. Now, actually, what could have happened on Law and Order more likely would have been that when they were offering plea bargains in the attorney's office, that the mother, if she ends up actually deciding to make a deal, then they would ask her to say what happened. But that would be the only case where that would occur. I mean, what happened in this? So that took me out of the episode. Really, the lack of realism in those scenes. And the other part was Falsone going to Janaway's house at the end, and the dad acting all like friendly with him. I thought that was bizarre too. Like, I think
he didn't need that scene.
Yeah, I'm like thinking there's no way he's going to let Falsone in his house. I mean, take the stuff back, okay, but he would take the stuff and close the door. Why is he going to act like suddenly he's Falsone's buddy? I mean, I don't get that at all. So that was a very strange thing. The credibility problem in this episode hurt it overall, is that it was tough for me to set those things aside. Acting was good. The scenes with Falsone and McCoy, again, I would have rather spent more time, like I said earlier, on like Munch and Briscoe conversations, or some of the other regular homicide detectives actually having more than a couple lines. Bayless said like 2 things maybe. So in that sense, I think it wasn't really fair play. Whereas in Law and Order, you had the homicide cops kind of play second fiddle, and then on Homicide they do again. So it really seemed they were. And I understand that at the time Law and Order had better ratings, so they were kind of trying to maybe focus on that. But it really just, analyzing it by itself as a homicide episode, is definitely not one of the better ones. It's not bad. Again, it's still enjoyable. I could sit there and enjoy the episode, but I've still got, probably with a couple of rare exceptions, it's the episode where I'm the most like, oh, come on, that's a little unbelievable.
Yeah, it was a bit.
The only thing that the only thing that makes it better than the episode Partners from season 3 that I gave a 6, the one that had the abused wife and the cop, the only thing that keeps it better than that is the fact that the acting was good consistently in this episode, and it wasn't in that one. So that's the main thing that makes this better. But plot-wise, there's holes in it.
Do you think
more so than usual?
Do you think Falsone is a little bit? I mean, does the actor talk like that in real life? It's sort of like overdone as like a character from a certain background. I mean, I mean by that is, with, say, someone like Lewis, the man on screen, folks, I get a sense that it's more believable, like him from his background, whereas it's like with Falsone, maybe. Personally, I don't think the actor is quite as good as the man who plays Lewis. He's okay.
I agree with you about that. It's funny you should say about the voice or the accent or whatever, because Lewis is actually the one that Clark Johnson's regular speaking voice is further away from Lewis, the character, than any of the other actors from their characters.
Is it probably like American theatre standard? Could be in Dr. Blake 7 type.
Not quite, but he is definitely more, let's put it, sophisticated sounding.
Yeah.
Than Lewis is.
Yeah.
John Seda, I don't remember if I've ever actually heard an interview with him. So my feeling is he probably is putting on a little bit of affectation, but I don't know how much. Because I don't remember if I've ever actually seen him in an interview. So,
yes. I mean, sometimes I think with Lewis, with Lewis, I have to have headphones on to make sure I understand. I mean, with the pilot episode, I only caught about half of what he was saying.
Yeah, as we've said before, Belzer is pretty much playing himself in most ways. Both Kyle Secor and Andre Braugher, for Homicide, I think, put a little bit more brooding to their characters than how they are in real life. I've seen them interviewed, and they're much more kind of affable, I guess you could say. They come across more friendly and cheerful than their characters do.
Well, they should be. The multi-millionaires.
Well,
right. You'd be happier. You'd be happier, wouldn't you, Jeff? Being on the series.
You understand what I'm saying, though. I mean, there's some actors where, like Clint Eastwood, he doesn't seem happy in interviews ever.
Well, he's 80.
Well, but even when he wasn't, I mean, he's a millionaire too. I mean, and he always has that same kind of intense kind of thing, no matter what. Whereas you have other people where they can play this really intense character, but then when you see them off screen, they're all jovial and totally different. So some actors really are much more like their characters, and that they're just kind of always that way.
I think maybe somebody has done a YouTube video of it, of like showing how Clint Eastwood's acting has improved from when he was in Rawhide. Like eventually, where he became an okay. You see, I've not seen him anything recent, but when he started in Rawhide, he was not a good actor, and even in the Dirty Harry movies, he was like limited, and so it's like seeing how he changes. But he was sort of right for that character.
Right. Before we were on the air here earlier, we were talking about Tom Cruise, and I think in some ways Clint Eastwood's very similar in that he was good at playing a particular style of character, and that it was later in his career where he started to actually kind of branch out a little bit and get noticed for being more of an actual better actor as opposed to just sort of playing a certain sort of character that was sort of a version of himself.
Yeah.
But yeah, this episode is, again, I'm not, I'm coming off kind of critical on it, and I don't think it's bad. It's just, there's just a lot of little things. There's just, they tried to pack too much into it, and it ends up being very kind of disjointed and haphazard, and not, the focus is all over the place. And so there's not anything where I'm like, well, this element was really that great, because there's too many things, and they're all just sort of all over the place.
There was a line in this from her that almost shocked me, Jeff. For a network show, what she said when they talked about Munch, and then she said, "Sounds like foreplay."
Oh yeah.
And I thought, whoa, that's a bit strong for a network show in '97.
And the funny thing about that is, I have no behind the scenes knowledge on that particular line, but I'd almost be willing to bet money that it was probably toned down from the way it was originally written, because they always have censor notes. Yeah, and so they probably had something more risque than that, and that was the censored version. Because the clever trick that the TV writers will do with the network is they put in stuff they know will be cut.
Bob Holmes did that.
In order to get other stuff through.
Yeah. Yep. Apparently Bob Holmes would do that. He would like put stuff in scripts, like jokes about sailors maybe being homosexual, and like they would get cut out, and then certain things would be. Yeah,
so they're always going to write it. They're always going to write it worse, so to speak, or more salacious, or because they know the censors are going to take stuff out, so they're going to end up with overall something that's in the direction they were going for, but won't be as strong.
But it also might have been the case that the censor might have been old and might not have actually got the reference.
Well, it's more than one person that looks at it, so I'm sure probably somebody did. But anyway.
Yeah, but I was still surprised, though. My mouth was open when I heard it. And I mean that literally.
And probably, again, this is just a guess, but I would think if they got a note on that line, probably the justification given to the network was, we're trying to establish this character as having a certain edge to her in this situation. She's trying to fit in with the male cops and kind of, establish herself as one of the guys. So this is essential that we have this line for her to do this.
And I bet the actress probably thought, well, I've not said that. I've only said one thing this whole episode, but I'm satisfied I got that line in.
Maybe so.
I think she'd be happy with that. I had a great line, and I got a fee for the episode.
I was most amused by what happened right after that, when they introduce, Lewis. Like, I don't think Briscoe and Curtis knew Lewis before from the time they were there. I don't remember them talking to him. They introduced them to Ballard, but don't even introduce them to Lewis. They were like, you don't care about him.
Oh, I just thought it was something like, they were more interested in the woman than the guy because they found her attractive or something.
That's what I'm saying. I just thought that was amusing, the way that they're like, oh, let me introduce you to Ballard, and we won't mention the other guy.
Yeah, that was okay. The acting of this guy was okay.
Yeah, see, I don't have a problem with his acting. I think it was just the way the character was written. He did seem in a fog.
He didn't tip his hand. The actor didn't tip his hand.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, it's like, it's not his fault that the story sort of didn't make sense, where there was no conversation between him and the lawyer establishing that he's trying to save himself and take his wife down. Yeah. It really just sort of seemed like he was kind of along for the ride. Yeah, and so that was the oddity of it.
And then you had Falsone talking about doing wanting to do a calendar of Baltimore's cops.
Yeah.
With shirtless. Now, this actor was a little bit less than ideal, I felt, in this particular scene. It wasn't disastrously bad, just not fantastic.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And we had Judge Andall was back. She was good in her limited role. Again, it was like sort of bits and pieces of people's performances, and nobody really got a chance to really shine that much because it was kind of all over the place. And yeah, there's the hotel where he used his own name for his affair.
Yeah. For 10 years.
Yeah. And I wonder how many times, maybe at some point, because I can't remember, did they ask her whether she was aware of the affair and she said no? Or I can't remember, because if it might have been that once she knew about it and, it just kind of continued at that point, he didn't care anymore, whether or not. But it seemed, at least you would think, for their daughter's sake, because she's a famous model,
Yeah.
that there would still be a little more discretion in that case. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, usually it's Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Or maybe they could do, even the master had an anagram.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and even, he wasn't necessarily famous, but he was still like a plastic surgeon or something. He was supposed to be known for,
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, that seemed a bit odd to me. There's just all these little kind of stretches.
I mean, these days, people, if they saw the name and they knew.
Yeah. So, to me, that's why it's a little bit of a letdown for Homicide, because it's got these things in it that I would expect from not as good cop shows.
Yeah.
And I don't include Law and Order as one of them. I'm saying both of the shows are better than the representation of this episode itself. It really seemed like a little bit of, like they didn't finish. Like this wasn't the final draft.
Yeah, at least we got more photos of her in it. We didn't see many photos of her at this sort of range in the Law and Order episode.
Yeah, but again, it's just unbelievable that the lawyer would let her sit there and have him do this to her. So it was tough for me to enjoy that scene, because they were able to do the photo thing in a more effective way when they did it where they had the Erber in there and Three Men and Adina when they were going to work on the Adina Watson case. And so you had the contrast of where photos were used very effectively versus this, where it was like the lawyer wouldn't let them do this, so why are they doing it? They just would have said, she wouldn't have been in there in the first place. But even if somehow she was, as soon as they started doing that, it would have been like, that's it, this interview's over, we're out of here.
So the central question, why did the man put up with the abuse from a wife that he didn't love anyway?
Yeah, they really don't cover that. All they have is him saying that he should have stopped it from happening.
Yeah.
But they don't really go into why he didn't. Other than, I guess, he's just portrayed as he's just a weakling, basically, and he's not going to risk anything. He's just going to try to keep things the way they are.
So would that be... So would Brittany Janaway... So, right, Rachel would be... Those would be the photos of her. And,
yeah, she had that brief video appearance they showed a couple of times.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Morris about, like, it was good to see more of Munch, but he really didn't get a chance to really be full on Munch. Again, he just was sort of, he was there. He had more lines in some episodes, but he's had much better opportunities to shine in the past.
Right. I'm gonna do my end thing now, my abstraction thing. The abstraction will be, Jeff, is this sort of like what the problem is, where you said that overall there is a dip in quality after season 5? And do you think the writers maybe were getting tired or something?
Well, yes and no. I think there's still there are much better episodes than this still to come. So I don't think I think that was sort of I said before, a little bit of a something, a not truism. I don't know what the right word is. Like, I don't agree that that the quality is that much lower in the last couple of seasons. There's a lot of really good stuff, especially in season 6. Season 7, not as much, but even then there still is. There's still enough episodes where when I look at it and I look at the individual episode description, I go, oh yeah, I mean that episode was pretty good. So, as far as running out of ideas or being tired, I don't know about that, but I think I don't agree with some of the choices they made. I think they spent too much time focusing on new characters instead of utilizing the ones they had already that were good.
Oh yeah.
They had more opportunities to do that, but I realize again some of that was network pressure, being like, we have people we think are more physically attractive. We want you to focus on those people.
What I've noticed is that in American television, that once series start getting to about these long-term series, these series that do over 20 episodes a year, and the writers do get burnt out after about 5 years. And yes, they still produce some good episodes, but it's like you can see that the drop off, and it happened in Star Trek. Well, the only one I really could say is like Star Trek. There was still some good episodes in Star Trek Voyager, and especially the comedy episodes in like season 6 and 7 are good. I mean, people should watch Star Trek Voyager, especially the comedy episodes. They're good on their own. But there's also a lot of dross, and I just think in general that writers can get burnt out from doing the same thing. And like as you said with the characters, maybe it's like, well, what do we have Pemberton say that he's not already said? What do we have Bayliss? What other dark secret can he have? Well, we've already had that one. Is it reasonable to have another dark secret? And it's like they want to do like the new and shiny thing is the Cedar character, Falsone, and
yeah, and I think there are ways that the new characters could have been worked in better than the way they were. Now, that having been said, one of my favorite episodes of the season heavily involves a couple of the new characters, but it's because it's better done. So that's the thing is, it's. I would say what I would say with the last 2 seasons of Homicide is it's less consistent, but there are still some really good things in it, especially in season 6. That's my opinion. And the very last episode of the show is really good. The movie follow-up, I mean, it was nice to see people back and stuff. That part was good, but plot-wise, it's it's not great. But the actual last episode of the show in season 7 is very well done as an episode. So,
did you go to the cinema to watch the movie when it came out?
No, it was a TV movie.
Oh, that's not a real movie, Jack.
And in fact, I didn't even see it for quite a while after it came out because I recorded it.
I was under the impression it was a proper movie, not a TV movie.
Well, your impression was wrong.
Right then, TV movie. Oh, that's different. That's just feature length. Right.
Yeah. No, I've for a long time. You know, they recently did I can tell from the trailers, horrible theater version of Baywatch. And was thinking before because the recent trend of making movie versions of TV shows from the past. Which ones I would make a theater movie out of, and I think, as much as I love Homicide, I think NYPD Blue would probably make a better theater movie than Homicide would.
Yeah, Homicide wouldn't make a good.
Yeah, it's in order for Homicide to succeed as a theater movie, I think it would have to be sort of a series of movies as opposed to one. It'd be harder to do it that way. Whereas I think with NYPD Blue, I could do it. I could come up with a story that would work for that.
Unless
obviously, if it was really successful, it could become a series. But
maybe you could do it as like maybe Frank gets fired and he becomes a PI or something, or what I know, Munch. One that you could do, just Munch and Briscoe together. There you go.
Yeah, well, I mean, without spoiling anything about future stuff and to come in the episodes or the movie, I'll say that there definitely is still potential for those characters. Like that's why I said I wanted to do like a big finish type thing with Homicide, where brought the actors back to do audio episodes, because then you can, you don't have to worry about the ages as much, as long as they can still sound reasonably.
That would be good. Munch and Briscoe, that would be a very good audio series.
Yeah, I mean, you got lots of possibilities. I would look at, if I was the one doing it, obviously whatever actors were willing to do it.
Yeah.
I would go ahead and use those people, because no matter who did, we could find a way to make that good. It could be a series about the same couple of people, but if a lot of them were willing to come back, then obviously we could alternate and do it kind of like Big Finish does with the Doctor Who audios, where they alternate between sort of Doctor and companion teams or whatever. So, we could have, one episode with Howard and Felton, and then the next one is Pemberton and Bayless or something, if those actors are willing to do it.
I mean, in terms of science fiction, Doctor Who by now must be like the biggest thing ever. Maybe even bigger than Star Trek in terms of like stuff that's on video and audio.
Well, yeah,
I know,
and certainly in longevity it is.
Yeah, in terms of minutes on screen.
Total media, yeah, it's probably.
Yeah. And I remember in novels, I know they count the Doctor as one character, but in terms of the English language, certainly, more novels have had the Doctor in than any other character.
All right, so anything else you wanted to say about Baby It's You?
Only that the title... I mean, has the title been explained, Jeff? I mean, what would you have called it?
It's not a very good title. I don't know what I would have called it off the top of my head, but I agree. I don't really think that's very good either. What would be your rating out of 10 for this part 2?
Oh, well, this is tricky because it was pretty low, and then they had that twist, and it's like the expectations game. Ooh. And I've been in a good mood today, so I'll probably give it a 7.
Well, I gave the Law and Order part a 6, and I thought the Law and Order part was better than this part, but it's not. This one isn't like lousy enough for me to drop it down to a 5, so I'll give it a 6 for this also. And like I said, I still think it's better than Partners just because the acting's better. But the storyline was. I just would have sent them back for another revision of this. If I was the one in charge, I'd be like, all right, we need to just clean this up a bit.
Yeah, it could be regarded as it's that where they have two faults with writing. Usually, either something's like understructured or overstructured, and maybe you could say that this is overstructured, right, with the twist that doesn't really quite work totally. But
the reason Law and Order episode was better is because they had less characters. I think they were able to focus a little bit better on that. Whereas in this, it's like they had too many people, and it was too all over the place. If the drama had really been in the courtroom, they'd focused on that. That might have worked better. Or if they'd focused on the interrogation thing, but not the unrealistic way they did it. So yeah, they're just, I've been pretty critical on it, but I feel like that by this time, Homicide has set a standard that this doesn't measure up to. So that's why. All right, so you gave it a 7, I gave it a 6, so an average of 6.5. And join us next time for Birthday.
Another great title. All right, bye-bye.
Bye.